In section 3 of module 1, we're going to talk about interval notation. So interval notation is used commonly with inequalities. So to review, an inequality is a relation between two expressions that aren't equal. Okay, so sometimes in math it's necessary to talk about large groups of numbers and it becomes impossible to list all of the numbers individually. So when this occurs, we use a notation called interval notation. So interval notation is a shorthand way of writing an inequality. So to review, there are 4 inequalities: greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. So the greater than or equal to, and then we have less than and less than or equal to. So with interval notation, we use brackets and parentheses to denote an interval. And I'll get into more detail about brackets and parentheses here in a little bit. So the first type of inequalities we're going to talk about are the strictly greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So for example, suppose we have the inequality that x is greater than or equal to a. And a can fall anywhere on our number line. Let's say a is here. So on a number line, we would put a closed circle over it for the equal to, and we would shade everything to the right. So for an interval notation, we use a bracket, then whatever our number a is, comma infinity with a parenthesis. So a bracket indicates that our inequality contained an equal to, that the value that we're greater than or equal to in this case can be a solution. Now infinity will always have a parenthesis with it because infinity is a concept, it's not an actual number, it just indicates that any number bigger works. And our next one is x greater than a. So let's suppose, so we have a again. This time, because I'm strictly greater than, I'm going to put an open circle and then everything to the right. So the only change in the interval is that now I put a parenthesis with a to indicate that it's not included in the solution. So another key thing to recognize here is that the inequality points to the way that you shade on the number line. So my inequality pointed to the right for greater than or equal to and greater than. I shaded everything to the right. Now we have x less than or equal to a. So a, so closed circle, now this time less than would be everything to the left. So the interval changes. This time, because it can be anything less than a, we start with negative infinity on the left with a parenthesis, comma a with a bracket, because the equal to means it's included. And then we have x less than a. So open circle at a, everything to the left, still starts with that negative infinity, but the right side of the interval is going to be a with a parenthesis. So we're going to go ahead and look at a couple examples. So we're going to express the following inequalities as a graph and an interval notation, because some people, it's easier to write the interval notation after seeing it graphed. So x greater than 2, so I'm going to draw a short number line, put 0, 1, 2. So because we have an greater than, I'm going to put an open circle at 2. The inequality points to the right, so it's everything to the right. So because it's a greater than inequality, my interval is my number, so in this case 2, comma infinity. Now infinity always gets a parenthesis, and then because I'm strictly greater than, the 2 is also going to get a parenthesis. Second example is x less than or equal to -5. So let's get our number line. I'm going to put a closed circle at -5 because of the equal to, and then less than goes to the left. So if I have a less than inequality, I always start with negative infinity, which is going to get a parenthesis, comma, and then my value, which in this case is -5, which is going to get a bracket because it is included as a potential solution. We can also use interval notation if we're looking at a set of numbers, set of values between two numbers. And the inequalities do not need to match. So there are 4 different inequalities notations that we're going to look at. So we have our value x, our variable x, and it's between two numbers b and a, and it's greater than or equal to b, but less than or equal to a. So on the number line, b is on the left and a is on the right, because that's how they appear in the inequality, and they both get closed circles because they're equal to, and then x is between them. So in interval notation, the value on the left goes on the left side, the value on the right goes on the right side, and because they're both equal to's, they get a bracket. Now if it's x is greater than b but less than a, b still goes on the left and a goes on the right, but this time we do open circles because they're not equal to. So the only difference in the interval is that they're both parentheses. But we can also mix and match. So suppose x is greater than or equal to b, but strictly less than a. So b is on the left, a is on the right. It has an equal to with b, but a strictly less than with a, so it gets an open circle. So in the interval, b gets a bracket, but a gets a parenthesis. And then it can be reversed. X can be strictly greater than b, but less than or equal to a. So b is on the left, a is on the right, but b gets the open circle this time, a gets the closed, and then everything in between. So in interval notation, that's a parenthesis with the b and a bracket with a. So we're going to express inequalities as a graph, and then again in interval notation. So we have x is greater than -5, but less than or equal to 2. So on my number line, we'll have -5 and 2, because it's strictly greater than -5. It's an open circle, but it's less than or equal to 2, so it's a closed circle, and then everything in between. So when I do my interval notation, the nice thing about these, it's the number on the left is always the left side of the interval, the value on the right is always the right side. Open circle, -5 is a parenthesis, closed circle, a 2 is a bracket. So we can do the same thing with x greater than -7 and x less than 2. We have -7 and 2. I am greater than -7, so open circle, less than 2, also an open circle, everything in between. So -7 goes on the left, 2 goes on the right, and because they're both open circles, they get parentheses. So far we've talked about what are called and inequalities. My solution was between two numbers, but there's also something called or, which means it can apply to one inequality or another. It doesn't have to fit both as long as one of them is true. So this looks a little bit different on a number line. So let's look at x is greater than 10 or x is less than or equal to -4. So let's say that's -4 and this is 10. So if I can be greater than 10, I have my open circle at 10, everything to the right. I can be less than or equal to -4, which is a closed circle at -4 and everything to the left. So notice how there's no overlap. So we're actually going to have two intervals. And when we're deciding which interval to write first, we always write the interval for the less than inequality first. So that means I'm going to write the interval that represents everything less than or equal to -4 first. So if it's a less than inequality, it starts with the parenthesis and negative infinity, comma, and then our value, which in this case is -4, and it gets a bracket. To represent the word or, we use something called a union, and it's basically a capital U. It represents the word or. Now I'm going to represent everything greater than 10. So a greater than starts with our value, which is 10 in this case. And because it's strictly greater than, it gets a parenthesis, comma, infinity with our close parenthesis. Our last example, we're looking at x greater than or equal to 1 or x less than 0. So we have 0 and we have 1. So if I am greater than or equal to 1, close circle at 1, everything to the right. And if I'm less than 0, that's an open circle at 0 and everything to the left. So I have to start with the less than, which is 0. So parenthesis, negative infinity, comma, our value 0. And because it's strictly less than, it gets a parenthesis. Our union U. And then everything greater than or equal to 1. So close circle means a bracket. Our value 1, comma, infinity with a parenthesis. So notice that no matter what type of inequality we have, when we're writing the interval notation, if there's an infinity or a negative infinity, it is always going to get a parenthesis. That is a very important concept from this section. Numbers are the only thing that can get a bracket. An infinity can never have a bracket. And if we're writing an or solution for inequalities, we have to remember to write the less than inequality first, and then our union, and then the greater than. Please let me know if you have any questions over section 3.